Hi, everybody. Matt here from Matt Likes Comics. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to say a shout out to a couple of channels that deserve it. Um, if you haven't checked him out yet, you should go check out Son of Crom. Son of Crom is a very big Conan fan, and I am also a big Conan fan. He's also a big Batman fan, so give him a check out. His channel's pretty nice, and he seems to be a very, very nice guy. So go give him a little quick check out. I also wanted to make a little shout out to Lettuce Comics because despite the fact that he has been taking some time off, he still makes nice high quality stuff, and I just absolutely love his humor. Which is the same thing I'm going to say about Ricky All Sorts of Words. I know he hasn't been on there for a while as much, but he's just hilarious. And every time I see him, I just enjoy myself. So if you haven't seen any of these people, go check them out. They're great. They're they're all great members of the community, and they deserve to be looked at. And the last guy I want to shout out is Chris at oh boy, I forgot the name. Oh my God, I forget North Garden. North Garden um, comics because he's quite the dollar bin diver, and really enjoy watching his stuff. He's found a lot of good stuff in there, and it inspires me to continue looking into the dollar bin. So that's Chris at North Garden Comics. Okay, so those four, give them a look. They're really pretty good, and I've enjoyed their channels for a while, and I hope you would too. Now, today, I want to share a bit of a storyline where one of the parts of it is one of the books that I really like and have liked for years, and it's I would call it the middle part of the saga. So that book, but I would like to show you all five parts of the saga. Now, two of them are consecutive books, but the rest of them are books done over the course of whatever. And the topic I want to cover is a character by the name of Jonathan Ross. Jonathan Ross is the son of Pete Ross, who pre-crisis, well, post-crisis too, but pre-crisis was Superman's best friend. So he saw Superboy change when he was a kid on a camping trip, and he kept that quiet to himself. And as a result, got honorary membership in the Legion of Superheroes when he was a teenager. Superboy never knew why, and I don't think Superman ever figured it out, even with the events of certain that are going to come up. But Pete had a son named Jonathan, and Jonathan, as a character, only appeared pre-crisis. Basically, all his appearances were over with by 1982, if even that way. Probably 1980 when I think about it now. But the storylines that Jonathan were involved with were really interesting. And that is one of the reasons why I decided to do this video today. I came across one of the books when I was putting away another book, and I thought, this would make for an interesting video, so I pulled them out. Basically, what happens was okay, Jonathan was born, and then his mother died at some point. So he was about 10 years old when the stories begin. And Pete was raising him on his own. Now, Pete had grown up to become a successful engineer and very rich. So that is a factor in these stories. So that's why it's a point that I bring up. Here is Action 457. The kid is on the cover. Superman is revealing his identity to him on the cover. This is Jonathan Ross's first appearance. And in this book, Superman is called when Pete Ross discovers that Jonathan isn't feeling very well. It turns out that Jonathan has lost the will to live. Apparently, it is a thing. It isn't just a Star Wars thing that everybody makes fun of from episode 3. Pete thinks that if Superman was to reveal his secret identity to John, it would save him and make him want to live again, because Superman apparently is John's hero and not be all and end all, for lack of a better phrase. So he shows him. He decides to show him. Except that John doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe he's Clark Kent. Doesn't really give explanations to why, per se. Just that he doesn't think that that kind of personality is Superman. So John spends the day with Superman, and they do some fighting and they do some, capturing of criminals and such. At which point John says, "You know what? Let's go to Clark Kent's apartment." So Superman brings him back to Clark's apartment, and after John sees his medicine cabinet in the bathroom, he finally admits that Superman is Clark Kent, because Clark does not have things like toothpaste, toothbrush, razor blades, etc., that most men would have. And, well, everyone would have a toothbrush, but he doesn't, even because he's invulnerable. He doesn't need it. Though, therefore, he concludes that perhaps, yes, he is Superman. I like I liked this story. It was an interesting little story. I mean, it's cute in a way, in its own way, but it's not like this huge story to go out and go, "Oh, you got to get it." But it is, as an introduction to a character, in the 30-cent era. That is pretty good. John's next appearance is in Action 460. Now, he's not in the main story. This book had two stories. The main story is the one that's on the cover, and the backup story was a story with Mr. Mxyzptlk. That is the story John shows up in. Basically, John appears in the backstory, and what happened was Mr. Mxyzptlk decides to bother Pete Ross just to get Superman's goat. He turns Pete into a garden statue and then sees John and decides, "Hey, I'm going to impress this kid with all the things I can do." So John is convinced to hang out with Mr. Mxyzptlk. So they go around town, basically, where Mixie is turning things into the way things look in his dimension. This is an 8-page story, so there's really not a lot to it. And John goes along with it. Mixie even gives John a little bit of his powers so John can do a thing or two, which he does. And he goes, "Oh, cool," in that way that, 10-year-old boys would be if they were given, unlimited magic powers. However, this kid is a little smarter, because Mxyzptlk decides to show John how he would stop Superman from making him say his name backwards. And he creates this inescapable ball. Okay? Which, without thinking, John kicks him in and traps Mxyzptlk in, and the only way he can escape is to say his name backwards and go back to his dimension for 90 days. Again, a cute little story about how sometimes people can be whatever. This, though, represents the end of the cutesy kid stories. Because with this one, and this is my favorite one of the bunch, with this one, things get real. This is DC Comics Presents 13. Superman teams up with the Legion of Superheroes. Now, I brought up how Pete was an honorary member of the Legion when he was a teenager. And what gets me about this story is that that is completely forgotten in this. Because if they had remembered that, this story could have gone a different way. Now, I'm glad in the sense that, because I like the story as it's presented, but to me, it makes one of those continuity things to say, why couldn't they just get this together? So, this book begins with a strange alien craft endangering an Earth rocket. Superman goes and saves the astronauts that are in the rocket, and once they're safe, he follows the spacecraft back to its planet of origin. and he discovers that they're called the Nervinian. So let's go with Nervinian race is starting an intergalactic war. Superman, of course, decides to use his powers to end the conflict. However, the Legion then, 4 members of the Legion, show up and explain to Superman that this conflict is the key to the peace they have in the 30th century. So Superman unwillingly leaves the scene and returns to Earth. Superman is then confronted by Pete Ross. Pete explains that aliens have kidnapped his son. He then reveals for the first time since he's learned it to Clark that he knows he's Superman, and so cut the crap, like don't deny it, cut the crap. I know you're Superman. Go save him. And he shows him a picture he drew of the alien craft, and sure enough, it is the Nervinian ship. So Superman flies off into space and goes back to that planet. In the meantime, the 4 members of the Legion that are there, Saturn Girl, Sunboy, Lightning Lad, and Dawnstar, and it's just those 4, and they're on the cover. They have found Jonathan on the planet, and they tell him what his future will be. When he responds, "No, it's not. I'm going to be rescued by Superman, and he's going to save me," Saturn Girl reads his mind and discovers, oh my God, he knows Superman's secret identity, so he must really be a friend. They realize Superman's coming back. Sure enough, Superman shows up, and despite everything, all his efforts, no matter what happens, as they always say, you can't change what's going to happen with the past. And for these guys, this is the past. So no matter what Superman does, he seems to be constantly denied getting John. Once Superman gets a chance to talk to the Legion, however, they realize that it's not an actual war because no other planet has mentioned it in their histories, but a series of war games. So Superman flies back to Earth and gets his robots, which no longer function in this time period on Earth because of pollution wrecking their brains. Their electronic brains, apparently. This was climate change in the 1970s, DC world, I guess. So he brings the robots. They become in charge of the games. However, Superman does realize that no, he can't bring John back because apparently John is the general that sets in motion this whole technological break that makes things happen 1,000 years from now. So he has to leave John behind. He goes home. He tells Pete what's going on. Pete is angry as heck. And he tells Superman, I'm going to make you pay. Which cues the next book in the series, DC Comics Presents 14. This is Superman and Superboy on the cover. And you're about to find out why. Clark and Lois attend at the Metropolis Court due to a big trial going on as reporters. There's a break in the trial and they decide to go for lunch when Clark is suddenly attacked by Superboy? Shocked to see his younger self, Clark is knocked into a wall and he falls covered in rubble. He takes advantage of the rubble to turn into Superman where Lois and nobody else can see him and confronts his younger self where they have a small little fight, but then Superboy retreats, telling him that he's going to be the doom of Superman. Well, Superman spends time searching Metropolis for his younger self, wondering how the heck they can coexist because they can't coexist in time because they're the same person. So if one enters a time they're in, the other one is supposed to be knocked out back to the time of the other one. So that, of course, becomes the mystery here. He then hears Jimmy's signal watch coming from the Grand Canyon. Off he rushes to the Grand Canyon, only to be hit with a kryptonite missile. When he awakens after the collision, he discovers that he's been shackled in kryptonite chains on the cliff face, and that is basically the picture on the cover. Superboy has brought all of his friends to be the jury for Superman's trial. Superman then realizes it's Pete Ross and not his younger self in his body. Ross explains that he wanted to get the ultimate revenge against Superman for leaving his son on the alien world. He broke into one of Luthor's laboratories and used a device that brought Superboy from the past while simultaneously swapping minds. So that Superboy was technically not Clark, and therefore did not do the disappearing act of them being in the same time spot. At this point, after the explanation, the jury finds Superman innocent of all charges, and Pete then threatens to kill everybody. Then we cut to Luthor's lair, where young Clark realizes his predicament and what has happened, and he realizes that his mind is in adult Pete Ross's body. He manages to go outside from the lair and realizes he's in Smallville. He recognizes enough to know that he can identify where he is. So he decides to go to the old Kent home to see if there's anything there that can help fix things. However, most of the stuff is gone, and all he can find is a whistle. Going back to the Grand Canyon, Superman manages to escape the chain with one long strength burst. When Pete sees this, that he's escaped, he flies off to get more kryptonite meteors. But suddenly, Krypto shows up to stop him. Pete, in the body of Superboy, and Krypto get into a fight match where they end up back on Earth in the Grand Canyon, and Superman is getting back to his full strength as he's moved away from the kryptonite. Having to face both Krypto and Superman, Pete knows that the jig is up and surrenders. Superman then brings him to the lab, does the swap back, sending his younger self back home through the time spear. At the end of the story, you see Superboy rewarding Krypto for something he doesn't know he's going to do yet. But the book ends with Superman vowing that he's going to do whatever it takes to fix Pete Ross. Which brings us to the last story in the arc. This is DC Comics Presents 25, starring Superman and the Phantom Stranger. This book, although they are connected, has almost two separate storylines. So we're going to ignore the majority of the Phantom Stranger parts because most of it does not have anything to do with the John Ross thing. The Phantom Stranger suddenly finds himself focused on Pete, sensing that occult forces are at work with him. Pete is not getting any better, and the Phantom Stranger thinks magic is involved. At the Fortress of Solitude, Superman is hit with sudden pain and suddenly looks up to see the Phantom Stranger there. The Phantom Stranger explains the magic that's going on, and it seems to be drawn to Superman and Pete Ross due to some personal failure. At this point, the Phantom Stranger has figured out what's going on and decides to go, telling Superman he must deal with his failure. Well, in his mind, Superman knows what his failure is. His failure was not saving Jonathan Ross. So he actually flies off to the planet again. And when the Superman robots he left react and start sending robot planes and ships after him, Superman, knowing how to defeat his own robots, was able to take them out and land on the planet. He finds John by concentrating on what he hopes to be the only human heartbeat on the planet, and is successful. Because he took out the defenses at the moment, he is able to escape the planet with John. Bringing John back, and they go to see Pete Ross, and Pete's suddenly cured. But part of the cure wasn't just seeing him, having John back. What we've missed is that the Phantom Stranger has determined the cause of this whole thing with the occult and making Pete Ross' anger bigger. And he manages to defeat the entity that is responsible for it. And the defeat of the entity coincides with the time that Superman brings Jonathan back to Earth. And therefore, everything is okay. And that's the end of the Jonathan Ross saga in terms of comics. John Ross does not make any more appearances that I was able to find. He does not exist after, because post-crisis, Pete marries Lana and they have no kids. At least in the first post-crisis era. After Infinity Crisis, Lana did have a child with Pete, but it was a little girl, I believe, and Pete had custody. But it's not the same child, obviously. If it's a boy, I'm blanking on whether it's a boy or not at the moment, but it's not Jonathan. He's named Clark. The new baby is named after Superman. So yes, it was a boy. Now that I say that, I know it was a boy. It was a boy, but it wasn't Jonathan. It was Clark Ross. So Jonathan no longer comes into continuity, which is too bad, because I think that a teenaged Jonathan Ross, coupled with the knowledge he would have picked up on the other planet, and the trust that Superman had shown in him, could have been an interesting side character that could have grown up to be somebody that could have helped out Superman a lot more. But such is such. I had no control over that. Anyway, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe below. I'd really appreciate it. I love when you guys leave me comments, because lately the comments on videos have been enough that where we're actually starting to have conversations on there. And that is what I want more than anything. I do these videos because I want to share the books. I want to share the contents. I want to share the stories. So as long as people are reacting to them, I'm very happy. As long as people are, even if they don't like them, I need to know this, because if you don't like it, I'd like to know why. Anyway, I hope everybody out there has a wonderful day. My name is Matt, and I like comics. And I hope you do too. Have a good one.